Hi, welcome to Fiberchats. My name is Irina, I'm the host here, and my guest is today my idol, the woman I admire greatly for many years, Elizabeth Lovick, the author of Shetland Lace Shawl, this book that I have right here. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hello, nice to be here.
I'm so happy that you agreed to this interview. So I must tell you the story of how I discovered you and Shetland Lace, and it basically happened on the same day. So I
Right.
was scrolling Instagram and I stumbled on Monique Boonstra's post and I started immediately following Monique Boonstra and I saw all this like beautiful lace and I was asking her, I sent her a message and I said, "What is that?" And she said, "It's Shetland lace." So I love researching things. Like if I see something new, I want to go in depth and learn everything about it.
Yeah.
So I went to my local library and I asked them, "What books do you have on Shetland lace?" And they only had one, and that was this particular book. So
Yeah.
I got the book, and the thing I love about this particular book is that not only you give the apprentice pieces so you can learn on smaller scale, you can learn on like simpler, like to learn all different kinds of shapes and all different
Yeah.
kinds of grafting techniques and everything, but you also give the history of Shetland lace, you give like the glimpse on how it started and how it's progressed and like what women had to go through to like knit those shawls and all of that things. So I saw this shawl on the cover, of course, and I was like, this is so beautiful. I want to make it. So that was my first introduction, not only to Shetland lace, but basically to lace in general.
And
And
that's not an easy piece.
not. So actually, like at the end of the thing, I figured out it was like one of the more difficult shows. Like I didn't do the apprentice pieces then. I started like
Yeah.
straight with like one of the most difficult shows, and
The
then
one that you wanted to do.
right. And I think like
That's key.
that's the right approach to knitting in general. Like just knit what you want to knit, and
Yeah.
somehow you'll figure it out.
Yes.
But I want to ask you, what was your journey of like learning about Shetland lace? Like when did your love of Shetland lace started?
Um, Before I knew it was Shetland lace, I started knitting when I was extremely young. I had I had one grandmother who wasn't very good with young children. She got fed up with me sort of leaning on her chair, watching her knit. And she got fed up and she gave me a ball and two needles and said, "Do it yourself." And apparently I did. I don't remember it, obviously, but this is what I'm told happened. So I started knitting very young and I started knitting lace quite young as well. And all through my teenage years and what have you, I was knitting what I now know is Shetland lace. But at that point, it wasn't, if you like, marketed as Shetland lace. It wasn't till, well, probably the 80s or so that I realized that most of what I liked doing was, in fact, Shetland lace. And got some books and the way one does, and obviously went from there. And when we moved up to Orkney nearly 30 years ago now, one of the first things I did was took the boat up to Shetland to see some of the lace in the museums and that there.
So do you remember like first time coming to Shetland? Like what did it feel like for you? Because like you love
Well,
Shetland lace.
we come up on the boat from Orkney, which takes about 7 hours, and it had been pretty rough. Um, and as you come up, um, you have this wonderful vista comes out on both sides. You've got Musa on your right. You've got the mainland, the head at the end near where the airport is very dramatic. And then you come up through and into Lerwick. So it's a place that has a big presence before you even set foot on it. We, as I say, we were there. It was in March, I think. It was still before the tourist season or anything.
Right.
But we then sort of started going around seeing people and what have you, and met some lovely people who I'm still in touch with, people like Margaret Peterson. And that was the beginning of the next stage.
Well, did you, when you got there, right, and you start looking at in the museum and the pieces or like examples of Shetland lace like done in Shetland, were there
Yes.
any discoveries for you? Like, did you look at it as like, was there something new for you?
Not in the museum in Lerwick, because in those days it was the old museum, and they had, was it 2 shawls or something? And that was about all they had on view. But we went up to Unst and were able to see the Unst Museum, and there, of course, they had a lot more. And there and because there weren't many people around, I was able to talk to the ladies for quite a while, and talk more about exactly how they did things, and what were the traditional bits, if you like, that have stayed, and what were more modern things that, because Shetland lace isn't just one time. You can't say that is traditional. Right. What was traditional 40 years ago is not now, or what's modern 40 years ago is now traditional. It is a living thing. It isn't just stuck in the 19th century.
I mean, I find this very interesting because, like, if you think about knitting in general, it always evolves, and it always, like,
yes,
we meet new people and they influence how we do things, and they teach us some new bits of technique. And even like in Shetland, like, even though like a lot of people use the knitting belts, it's not all over Shetland where they do it. Like, there are parts where they don't. So it's like there was so much influence from outside in Shetland. That it's all mixing pots, sort of and like traditions.
And the other thing you get is in Shetland, like Orkney, being a seafaring set of islands, when they went to different places, to the Baltic, all around Scandinavia, over to Iceland, Faroes and all that, they would bring things back from there. And so you get this cross-fertilization of ideas.
Right.
And if you remember that the early Shetland knitters were all knitting for the money. They were knitting for the money. They wanted to make things that were a little bit different, perhaps, that they might get a bit more money from, or they were looking for something that would look incredibly complicated, but actually go quite easily.
Right. Were you surprised with the speed of the Shetland knitters?
No, because I've been a knitter so long, and my ancestry is from Cornwall. And so my other grandmother, the Cornish one, she used to knit at an immense speed. And so that's something I've been taught right from the start. As you work from the tip of the needle. You don't work from here, you work right from here. And that's the key to getting fast.
When you teach now, because you do a lot of teaching of all different kinds of subjects, when you teach Shetland lace, like, what are the first tips you give to your students? The first thing I always do is give a short introduction with pictures of Shetland, pictures of some of the old lace, and then I'll put up a picture of an old piece and show them how it's actually made up of small bits. It looks complicated, but when you look at it, no, that bit is the same as that bit, and that, and give them that idea. I then make sure that they can use a chart, because that's so much easier. And then I let them get on with making a bookmark, and tend to talk people while they're doing that. Some people will ask questions and what have you. But I always bring it back to the 2 words, economic imperative. Shetland lace has always been something, because you're wanting to sell it to get money to feed yourself and your family, you want something that looks complex, but is relatively easy to do. Right. I mean, I find so many people are like scared of lace in general.
Yes.
And I always say, like, listen, if you can knit and you know the yarn over and you know how to knit
Yeah.
two and three together, you're golden. Like, you can do anything.
That's all you do. Yeah. And that's one thing that's quite interesting in Shetland lace. It's all knit, purl, yarn over, and then knit and purl 2 or 3 together. Now, if you go to some of the other lace traditions around the North Atlantic Rim, Icelandic and Estonian and things like that, they all have a much more complex set of things that you do. You do gathered stitches, you do various cross stitches and things like that. And again, this shows the way that Shetland lace is all bent on doing things that are easy,
Right.
quickly.
Right.
Yeah.
When you were writing this book, I mean, first of all, how did you get the courage and the self-esteem basically to start writing a book? Because once you put it in writing, you are the expert. Like, where
Yeah.
did you find that inner strength to tell the world that you're an expert?
Right. Facebook is the honest answer. The publisher contacted me via Facebook was the first for that one. I'd already been doing quite a bit of teaching of Shetland lace, and I'd already done ebook of Shetland lace and various other things like that. I'd done some work for Jimmerson and Smith, the Shetland people, wool people, and through that, the publishing company contacted me and said they wanted that would I be prepared to do what was basically a stitch dictionary. And so that's what we did, and we put a lot of we worked together to put in what I felt needed to go in, things like the apprentice pieces and that. And then the Shetland Shawls book that came after it, because people were wanting more projects.
Well, your shawls, like this, for example, right? It's not necessarily something you see in traditional Shetland lace. Like the heart shape, it's like it's more contemporary take on the Shetland lace, using like very traditional motifs like the flowers and all.
Yes.
How did you come up with those ideas? Like, what inspired you for those ideas?
Well, again, do you want the honest answer? I had misread the ferry times. I was living on an island called Flotter at the time in Orkney, and I was thinking it was Monday, not Tuesday, so I went down to the boat at 2 instead of 2:30. When I realised I'd got half an hour to wait, I'd been thinking about things, and I just took out literally an envelope and a pen I had in the car and started drawing bits and pieces. And I got 5 shawls, basically 5 pieces in that half hour. Obviously, then you have to go back and do it, but that's where the ideas came from. And I wanted to have both the sort of the traditional sort of piece and also some more modern pieces. I also wanted different levels of complexity, because in the book, it isn't about how difficult they are, it's how much you have to concentrate, right? So none of the patterns are more difficult than any of the others, but some you have to concentrate harder on. And that's why we use the 1, 2, and 3 C's for concentration. So the ones where you can do it when you're doing something else are 1 C, a bit more 2 C's. And by the time you get to 3 C's, you're doing holes on every row and things like that.
Right. Well, how was that book received? Like, was there any criticism of the fact that you are not Shetlander?
No. I had the people in Shetland who were in the both in Unst and in Lerwick and that, I mean, they by then knew me well because I was coming and going, and I was bringing parties of people there. And they knew that I understood Shetland lace. I knew what I was talking about. I didn't pretend that I knew everything about it. And I used, and I named people whenever I used an idea or something that had come from somebody in particular. But that I think is important. That you don't pretend you know absolutely everything. No, you don't.
I mean, like when we talked before the interview a little bit, I told you that like I feel like this is what connects us, because we both have the love of Shetland lace and deep respect for the tradition of Shetland lace without actually being Shetlanders. And we had a lot of discussion in Fine Shetland Lace group about it, and about how like the art of Shetland lace is almost on the border of extinction, and the people like you who put it in writing and who allowed the wide world to learn something about it are the people that keeping it alive.
This is politics. It's always difficult with these things. I think and not everybody would agree with me, I think it is important that the background to Shetland lace is known, exactly what lace was in the 19th century, early 20th century. I think that is important, and that you know what where from Shetland you're coming from, sort of thing. You need to recognize the fact that the people there were the ones who were designing these things, but also they didn't keep to the same things. They were making innovations. Right. And I think, and again, I know a lot of the Shetland lace people on Shetland, the Shetlanders, agree that it is not a static tradition, that it needs to move forward if it's going to live. And these days, that means you harness the enthusiasm from anywhere.
Right. Well, what's your feeling about using different kind of materials for Shetland lace? Like, must it be done with the Shetland wool?
No. I'm afraid, again, some people will say I'm completely wrong. But you see, the haps like you've got in the background there, those were made in fork-eye fingering, that sort of way. They weren't, the very fine ring shawls were only made by a few people ever. And basically, you've got the beauty of these stitches, and they can look fabulous in a chunky yarn. And if they can, why not?
Right. I mean, and I also like I've seen people knitting it with linen because they had wool allergies. I've seen people knitting it with silk and with cashmere, like all kinds of different fibers.
Yep. Absolutely. Use what you want.
Well, when it comes to you, and I see like all the pictures that I've seen of you, you're always wearing some colorful sweaters, and like you love knitting not only Shetland lace. Like, how do you decide when you're gonna knit what? Like, what do you usually like to work on?
Normally, I would have some lace on the go. I would have maybe a Gansey, maybe a stranded knitting. At the moment, for quite a long time, I've been working on a book of Orkney knitwear, which has those three traditions and some similarities with Shetland lace, some with Estonia and Finland and things like that as well. So at the moment, I'm getting to a stage with that we've almost got everything knitted up. So I'm just finishing that off. The other thing I've been doing recently, just simply for fun, is there's a dyer in the UK called Rainbow Fusions, and she does the most wonderful dyeing, fabulous dyeing. And so I've been making quite a few fun things with her stuff.
How did it feel when you started teaching? Like your first class, how did that happen? Was it like very natural for you to teach?
I have always taught. From when I was really quite small, I've always taught. And for a while, quite a while, I was actually, I taught chemistry at a secondary school in England. And so when, you know, it's in the genes. I've always taught. I can't remember where my first knitting one was. Can't remember at all. It was a long time ago. No, can't remember. Sorry.
It's fine. Do you have like favorite classes to teach?
I always want to teach what the people in the class want to learn. So rather than say, I have a list of, I will teach this, this, tell me which, I say to whoever's organizing the whatever it is, what do you want me to teach? And that's what I'll do. I mean, there've been some, there's one or two places, knitting shops down in Scotland that I've been to quite a bit. And they have sort of said, oh, can you teach us about so-and-so? And that's what I've done, you know, and it varies. I've done quite a bit of Faroese stuff as well, again, because I'm lucky enough to have friends in the Faroe Islands, and I've been there quite a few times. I'm still again in contact with them, and their form of both lace and stranded is again subtly different. Right. From Shetland and Orkney and that.
When you look at your life, like you moved around, you worked in different areas.
Yeah.
Was knitting always something that connected you with other people, helped you find friends in new places?
No, I was very much doing it from home until we moved up here. I knew a lot of people who did knit, you know, and I was always knitting. But there wasn't the community where I had been until, as I say, I came up here. And then there was there's a place called the Workshop, is what it's called. It's a craft cooperative in one of the islands, and I was involved with that. And that's where I got more knitting friends, and then of course online. And once you've got the net, you know, you have friends everywhere.
So like once you discovered the knitting net, how those friends are different from your regular life friends? Like what do you feel the knitting community brings to your life?
I'm always learning. I'm always learning. You know, all sorts of people, when you're in contact with people literally all around the globe, and they have a slightly different attitude to life. They have different skills. Different places obviously have different traditions. You know, I just love that. I love to be in contact with people from different countries. I just love it. I always remember I was actually on a cruise, and one of the outings in the Ukraine, we went to a place. Most of the group went off to see something or other farther than I could walk. So I stayed, and there was a woman and a daughter, and they had some shawls. And the daughter was knitting, and they had no English at all. All they knew, the only English they knew, was the price they were asking. But we were able, and of course my Russian is just non-existent, and we were able to communicate, and they were able to tell me that they had their own goats, that they took the mohair and what have you off the goats, that they spun it with a spindle, and they showed, you know, and I told them I used a wheel mainly, and that they they both spun and knitted in the grease and only washed it when they'd finished.
Interesting.
To get the sheen is better if you do that. And all of this without a single word of common knowledge. But, you know, knitting, spinning, and things, you know, you could, so much you can communicate.
Right. That's a wonderful story. I love it.
Yeah.
When did you learn how to spin? Because I saw you have a YouTube channel and you show some spinning and you show some of your wheels and how to take care of them there.
Yeah.
What was that journey for you like?
I've always wanted to spin, and when we moved up here, it so happened that there was a spinning class in Kirkwall, and that's when I learnt. So I've only been spinning for 28 years, but yeah, I took to it very quickly, and I love it. I find spinning a relaxation. Yeah.
How do you balance your time between spinning and knitting? Because both of them take a while.
Yes, they do. And again, we're coming down to money, aren't we? Economic imperative. I do more knitting. I just yesterday did the first part of a video to show how to open up a braid before you spin it. And that will be one of a series I'm going to do on preparing stuff. I've already got the written stuff. I just need the videos. And if you could see around me here, I've actually got the lights and the camera and everything all ready, because this is where I do my videos.
Have you ever imagined yourself being like a high-tech teacher and YouTuber?
No, because my health just won't allow such things. I've got umpteen conditions and I'm getting worse. And there was so much I could do, but I can't, and I've just got to live with that.
Right. When you wake up in the morning, do you have already like all the ideas for this week, like of what you're gonna work on, or you wake up and you take each day as it comes in?
It's a sort of hybrid, because I never know how I'm going to be health-wise. I tend to have a couple of scenarios, one if I feel okay and one if I don't. If I don't, I always have something easy on the needles so I can sit and listen to an audiobook, and everything I knit becomes a pattern in the end. So I do that. But if I feel okay, I know what I want to do. So it's very much a case of I have a rough idea, but I've found if I'm too definite, it depresses me when I can't do it, basically.
Right.
And that is what I find works for me. Again, everybody's different. You need to find out the way that you work best.
Right. I mean, when you're living with chronic condition, that's like when you don't know how you're gonna feel every day, is knitting something you like always brings you comfort? Like, do you never, like, is there ever a day when you don't knit?
There may be one or two, but not very many. I've always got something just by my chair. And very occasionally I don't, but almost every day, yeah, I'm knitting something. Yeah. And I've also got a number of patterns that are going through the process of grading and page setting and things.
As a designer, like, what's your favorite part of design and what's your least favorite part of being a designer?
The least favorite is all the faff having to get it online and get it all done. You know, that sort of thing is always a faff. It has to be done. The best bit is when you finish something and it's either just like you expected or wanted it to be, or even better. And that is brilliant. And lo and behold, you know, you've got what you wanted. And hopefully other people will like it too.
How do you feel like when you see your designs out there in the world, like when other people make stuff that you design?
I like it, and I especially like the, the times when people take one of my designs and change it slightly for what they want. Now, I know some designers don't like that. I do. Again, I suppose it's the teacher in me. You know, it's fabulous when somebody takes my design and says, I don't want long sleeves on that. I want short, and does it. Or I want that sleeveless, so I'll just do this round here and that round there. Or, you know, it's supposed to be rib at the bottom, but I want it as a tunic, not as a sweater. And so they change it to garter stitch. I love that sort of thing.
Like I call my all the Shetland lace that I've knitted so far my heirloom collection because
Yeah.
like, this is something I knit a lot of things and most of the stuff I knit I give to other people.
Yes.
But the
Yes.
Shetland lace stays in my family. And it was
Yeah.
even a joke when my son was dating a girl and he brought her home and he said, why won't you give her like one of your Shetland shawls? And I said, well, she'll have to change her name for that and be part of
Yes.
it. Um, do you have an heirloom piece in your home, like something that you would never part, something that you cherish?
Well, I did quite a long time ago. I did a pie shawl called the Orkney pie because it was using Orkney patterns. And my son got married this summer, and he rang and said, had he got anything that Jen could wear in the evening, just, you know, if it gets a bit cold. So I took that down for her. And anyway, she rang the next day and said, could I keep it? And that was lovely. It really was. The heirloom set from Magical Shetland Shawls, I've got and will be keeping, and that will go to my granddaughter, I suspect, when she has a baby.
I mean, that's what I love about Shetland lace also. It's like it's one of those things that can stay with proper care, like
Yeah,
for
yeah,
ages,
yeah.
basically.
And also, I mean, I did a pattern quite a while ago called Kataria, where it was a shawl that could be used as a baby shawl, but equally it could be used for mom, you know. And again, I like that sort of thing where something can have more than one use, you know.
Right. What are you working on nowadays? Like that book of Orkney, right?
Yeah, yes, I'm working on that. I've just finished this, which was from the um, Rainbow Fusions advent calendar. So I've just finished that. And I'm about to start on a child sweater for the book with Orkney stranded patterns,
Right.
which again are subtly different from the Fair Isle and from the uh, Faroese. So subtly different.
So when you do research for the book, like what part of it is your favorite? Like, is it coming up with the ideas for the patterns or learning the background story of what you're trying to showcase?
I love going into the library and archive, looking at the photos, the old photos. Now in Orkney, nobody keeps knitwear because they haven't got room. Knitwear's everyday stuff, you know, and it wears out. But there are some fantastic photographs in the archive, and the people there are just so lovely. And I can go in and I can look and see all these photos. I'm very lucky because there was a guy who in 1910, 9 or 10, was given a camera for Christmas, and he took photos of everybody going into the kirk on Sunday morning. So you've got all these people, you know, in their family group standing just by the door. And then later he went round all these families and took photos of them in their everyday clothes. And of course, that has lots of knitted stuff. Up here for best, they wore woven things, but for working. And one thing that always makes me giggle is the fact that, as any female knitter knows, no man knows the inside and the outside of a sweater, just as they don't know front and back. So you get these pictures of people working and you can see that they're inside out, but that means you can see how they're made. And for me, that's brilliant. So I can say, right, I know how that's made because there's a seam here, there's something there, or whatever, which is great.
Right. It's funny because like I was watching some series on Netflix, and I can't even remember the name of it or much of what it was about. I just know it was like right before the Second World War and like the Second World War time in England and like rural England. And the reason why I can't even remember anything, because I was so concentrated on all the knitwear they were having.
Knitwear, yes.
It was
yeah.
so beautiful. I was like snapping pictures with my phone of everything.
Yeah.
I was like, look at that vest and look at that sweater. It was just like,
yeah.
So it's like you see the life of people through that knitwear, through those.
Yes.
Emotions.
Yeah.
When you like in a group like Fine Shetland Lace, do you see it like as a source of inspiration? Do you see it as like hope for the lace being alive?
I certainly think that being able, for knitters all around the world, being able to show their knitting and to be able to see other people's knitting is a tremendous thing, absolutely brilliant thing. I'm quite happy when people take a bit of this and a bit of that, and it might not be traditional. Who cares? You know, so yeah, and I go there, and in a sense, there's a lot of things that I know that other people don't, just because I'm living near, I've been there, blah, blah, blah. So I therefore have a better knowledge, background knowledge, than somebody who's never set foot in the place. And so there are times when I feel, you know, I can say, well, actually, so-and-so, you know, there are now a couple of Shetlanders there, which is great. And so I'm finding I'm standing back because they know exactly, they're from Shetland, they know exactly what's happening.
When you meet like people and they immediately know who you are, like you have that celebrity moment, how does it feel? Like, do you get that celebrity moment? Like you walk into the grocery store and somebody says, you're Liz Lovick.
Yes, it does happen. Up here, of course, you know, we're in Orkney, there is a huge number of creatives, huge number. And so it's just like anybody else, you know. Yeah, when I go south, yes, do get this sort of thing. Yeah, you try and smile and say, you know, you want to be nice to people.
Right. I mean, it's not even that being nice to people. I mean, just like honestly, like I feel like when I'm talking to you, it's almost surreal for me because this is like a dream. It's like interviewing Elvis, like. Like we all have our own idols out there, so for me it's like such a pleasure to talk to you, you know, to
no, I love it when I'm talking to people, you know, other people, because everybody has a different take on things.
Right. I mean, I feel like there is like I was talking to a lady recently, and she mentioned that there is this ripple effect, and if you're trying to picture of all the people you are affected by doing something in life, and I think your ripple effect, it's like a tsunami around the world.
Yes.
The amount of people whose life you touched, you might not even know that. Like you didn't know that you were my first entrance into the Shetland Lace.
No, I didn't. That's lovely to know. It really is.
Right. And I mean, I feel like between the fact that you like how many people you taught all different kinds of skills and your books and your input in the community, I think it's absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
I think you touched a lot of people with your work and your knitting. Which is
Thank you.
like, it's interesting because like if you think about when you mentioned that you were knitting at home most of the time, knitting
Yeah,
seems to be like such a solitary thing, and especially when
yeah,
knitting lace, it's not something you can do on the go. Like you need to sit and concentrate, you know,
yeah,
especially the 3C lace.
yes,
And yet with all that, it's still possible to have this impact on the life of others and on the community.
yes, yeah. And again, this is where the net is brilliant. There are days when I could throw the net, but most of the time I just love it.
Right. When you were writing this book, there are a lot of stories of like how the women were blocking the shawls and how they were uh, carrying like their stuff, knitting with them around and knitting with the knitting belt. Why did you feel like it was so important to tell the story of those women?
Because I think that it is important to have the, I was going to say academic historical research there. There are an awful lot of books which romanticize Shetland. But I think it's very important for people to know what the actuality was like. Once you know that, then you can do what you like with it. But I don't like it when people sort of suggest that these women in the end of the 19th century were all sort of romantically doing their knitting. No, it wasn't like that. It was a blooming hard life, very hard life. And I think it's important to have those facts out there, so people know what the reality is.
You know what was most interesting for me when I was interviewing Shetlanders, and I had quite a few Shetlanders on my channel.
Yeah.
I always like they all of them were talking about how they learned to knit like very early on, and it was part of like it was expectant of everybody to learn how to knit because
Yes.
that was part how you make a little extra money for the
Extra money. Yeah.
right. And like it was the boys were knitting, the girls were knitting, like everybody was
Yes.
expected to pull their weight. And my mother, like when she was growing up in post-war, I mean, she was born right after the Second World War, so it was like tough times in
Yes.
Russia, and her mother was like superbly crafty, and she was knitting and sewing as a way to make extra money.
Yes.
And when my mother was growing up, she also knew, like, she was taught from the early age all of those skills. But when she was growing up, she sort of resented it as a sign of poverty.
Yes.
And yet, every
Yes.
time I talk to Shetlanders, they have this love for the craft. Like, it's somehow, even though it came from the necessity, even though it was how you make a living, yet they still, like, have this passionate love for the art of
Yes.
knitting.
I think part of that is just 50 years difference. When a society, when something in a society, here knitting, is basically part of poverty, the next generation, when they get a bit of money, they don't want anything to do with it. But then the next generation on very often looks back and sees the beauty of the pieces and that, and wants to know. And I think that's a lot of it. That in a sense the poverty was further away historically than it is in Russia, sort of thing.
Right.
That basically the First World War changed everything here, whereas in other places it was the Second World War that changed everything.
Right. I mean, it's very interesting to look back at the knitting from the history part of view and to see like even like the amount of how knitting was perceived during the wars, because you were
Yeah.
knitting for the soldiers, you were knitting for the front, like it was a
Yes.
patriotic duty to knit. So like nowadays knitting became just a hobby that you do for fun, basically.
Yes.
Just coming back as a cool thing to do. But at
Yeah.
that point it was either out of necessity or even as an act of patriotism.
Yes. Yes. And I mean, I was involved with this film called Tell Them of Us, which was a women's take on it was one family in Lincolnshire. It was the women, the three main women, and we ended up doing a book called Centenary Stitches with a lot of the patterns that we had knitted for the film. And it was fascinating looking at the old patterns, because we used patterns from that era and translated them into modern knitting terms and things like that, and resized them and that. Yes, and it was very interesting. All the stuff I could find was from the First World War, was from England and from America, especially the east coast of America. And I couldn't find anything from the German side. When it came to the Second World War, there was more written, but very little was actually written. They were knitting for their sons and that, but there wasn't the sort of patriotic thing going in Germany in the First World War, it seems. And again, this is where, when you've got the net and you've got friends who are German, who are German academics who know these things, it's lovely to see both sides of it.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting to do all this research now and look back and see how it's all changes. And it's I feel like we talked about it also before the interview, that because there's so many influences, and there always has been, like, even in the case of Shetland, there was it's a seaport, so there's coming on the ships from all over the Northern Sea, let's say, even. It's always changing and it's always evolving. And while it's very important to keep the tradition alive, it's also very interesting to see that progression and that change in knitting.
Yes, yeah, it is.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much for being my guest today, because I truly enjoyed talking to you, and I feel like it was a great honor to have you on my channel.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I've thoroughly enjoyed it too.
Thank you.